My name is Jim Schmiedeler. I'm a mechanical engineer by training and profession. I'm a professor in the Department of Aerospace and Mechanical Engineering at the University of Notre Dame. I currently live in South Bend, Indiana, which, ironically enough, is my hometown. I escaped for about 12 years, and I've been back almost that long now. So I went to Notre Dame for my undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering, and then I got my master's and PhD in mechanical engineering at Ohio State. So my father was an electrical engineer, and I'm the youngest of three in my family, and I think the only one who from any early age showed any interest or perhaps aptitude for engineering. And so I got a lot of encouragement when I was a kid to think about technical things, and I would be given broken appliances and electronics at the house that I got to take apart. I never fixed them and made them work again, but I always enjoyed sort of seeing the guts inside of things. And I tell my students that Legos ruined my life, which is to some extent really true. I grew up playing extensively with Legos and was sort of finding a career that could have that same fun and play in it. And I do research in robotics, and we build robots in my lab. And so really I found a way to continue to be a kid at heart in my profession. So from fairly early on, I considered the possibility. But even when I was a first-year student in undergraduate, I wasn't completely sure I wanted to be an engineer, or let alone a mechanical engineer. And that was one of the things that I found attractive about the University of Notre Dame, that if I decided that engineering wasn't for me, there seemed to be a lot of good avenues to study other things here. Ironically, that's exactly what I ended up doing, was mechanical engineering. But I wasn't 100% sure, even though I had considered it and sort of thought about it from the time I was a child, I suppose. I always dreamed I would do a dual major in philosophy and mechanical engineering, and the extra year and extra cost of doing that seemed prohibitive. But if I wasn't an engineer now, it's hard for me to imagine what I would do. It really is an excellent fit. And I think when I didn't know that much about it as a college freshman or a freshman or a senior in high school. And so that uncertainty was a little scary, right? To commit to something at that level. The signposts were there to indicate that would probably be something that I would like. But it wasn't really until I was at the end of my first year of college when the aspects of physics class that I really loved were the mechanical aspects. And I enjoyed the other subjects that I was taking, but that was really, I think, where my abilities met my passions. I originally had thought I should be an aerospace engineer because my father, who was very influential, had worked in the aerospace industry. And from the time I was 4 years old, I got calendars of airplanes that was left over from his office, and was always fascinated by that. And so I thought seriously about that, and ultimately decided that mechanical engineering was more flexible, that I could go and do work in aerospace if that's what I chose. But I wasn't sort of limited to that. And that turned out for me to be the right decision, because once we got into the curriculum, there's a lot of commonality between the aerospace program and the mechanical engineering program. And I actually found out as a junior that the areas of mechanical engineering that most closely overlap with aerospace, I wasn't very good at. And so I think I would have, if I had gone the aerospace route, probably found a different major that wasn't going to be aligned perfectly with my abilities, let alone my interests. So that was a fortuitous decision that some good mentors helped me make. by explaining to me the difference between the two. And it's interesting, I find many of the students who pursue aerospace engineering, at least here at Notre Dame, have a much more definitive vision that they love aerospace and that's what they want to do. And I wasn't really that student. So when I was a junior in college, like many of the juniors, I got an internship at an aerospace company for the summer. And I had a great experience. I worked with some really impressive engineers. And yet I noticed that in that summer, the people who did, at this particular company, the people who did the really technical work that I found exciting all had master's degrees. And so I came back to school and I thought, well, boy, I guess I have to get a master's degree because that's the kind of work that I want to do. And that's when I first really considered graduate school. It hadn't been a plan of mine at all before that experience. And so I applied for jobs with companies that would consider sending me for a master's degree, and I applied for graduate school at the same time. I kind of doubled my workload, which in retrospect seemed kind of ridiculous. But and so I didn't do very well in the job interviews, maybe because that wasn't exactly where my heart was. But I did get into graduate school and was fortunate enough to go to Ohio State and work with an advisor in robotics who I was really excited about. I basically had really two choices for graduate school and chose Ohio State almost entirely based on a good feeling about the advisor I would work for and the kinds of projects that he did. And that was, again, a really fortuitous decision to me, for me, because he was a fantastic mentor, and the projects in his lab were really exciting to me. And so I give advice to any undergraduate now, you need to get those two things right when choosing a grad school. Work for an advisor you get along with, and on a project you're excited about. And that certainly helped me. When I graduated from Ohio State, I wasn't 100% sure I wanted to have a faculty position with teaching and research responsibilities. I thought that's what I wanted to do. I was pretty sure I wanted to teach. I had had that experience in graduate school. My advisor had gone on sabbatical for a year, and I had taught his class while he was gone and really enjoyed that. And that's what convinced me to stay for the PhD. I had gone to graduate school thinking I'd get a master's and get a job. And I liked the work I was doing too much, I would say. And I thought, well, maybe we'll see how this teaching thing goes. And then I got the experience to teach, and I really loved it. And so when it was time to graduate, I could apply for teaching-only jobs or teaching and research jobs or industry or government lab. And I wanted to give the teaching a try. And it seemed like if I applied to schools that had teaching and research faculty positions and I didn't like it, I could always go to industry or go to a teaching-only position. But if I went to industry or I went to a teaching-only position, it would be harder to find a teaching and research position. So I made decisions that left doors open for me, which was kind of how I had chosen a degree in a university and a grad school. And so that strategy had worked. So my first job was at the University of Iowa. And I was teaching in the mechanical and industrial engineering department. Again, some really terrific colleagues, some great mentors there. And while I was there, I got engaged to my now wife, and my PhD advisor's job back at Ohio State opened up. And my now wife was living in Ohio at the time, and there were more career opportunities for her there in Columbus, and it seemed like a good chance for me to have a really desirable position. Having your PhD advisor's job is a sweet deal. So I applied for and got that job and got married and moved, and then I taught at Ohio State for 5 years in the mechanical engineering department. And then another life change came along, and my wife and I were thinking about having children, and there was a job opening at Notre Dame, which is my hometown and not far from where my wife grew up. A department I certainly had a soft spot in my heart for, having been an undergraduate here. And so I applied for that job and got it. And so I moved here. It'll be 10 years this fall that I'm back here at Notre Dame. And so I don't think most people draw up having 3 different academic jobs in the first 7 to 8 years of their career. It's certainly not how I plan things, but it's worked out extremely well for me. I've met some really great people. I've had a chance to work with a lot of different people. I still work with colleagues at Ohio State, which is tremendous. And it's been a great journey for me, both professionally and personally. So I knew I wanted to study robotics in graduate school, and the advisor that I chose worked on primarily walking robots and mechanical design. And I remember I showed up for the first day, and he said, you know, I think we should work on galloping. No one has built a galloping robot. Let's work on that. And so he handed me a stack of papers to read, and I started on a project of analyzing the galloping motion of quadruped animals, because we know much more about, at that time, we still know much more about how animals gallop than we do how to make robots gallop. And that was really exciting. I was reading papers on dogs and antelope, and then trying to extract principles from those results that we could use to design and build robots that would be capable of similar high-speed galloping. And then it came time, I finished my master's degree, which was a modeling project, and I talked to my PhD advisor, said, you know, I really want to have the experience of building hardware before I finish my degree. He said, okay, let's build a galloping machine. It was go and do. And that was great. He was a very hands-off advisor who gave you sort of just the right amount of rope that you didn't quite hang yourself. And so we didn't build a full galloping machine in my PhD, but I built a leg that we tested and demonstrated capacity for galloping. And he went on to continue the project after I finished and built a machine that would bound but not gallop. And so I got to combine modeling, understanding basic dynamics, as well as designing, building, and experimenting with a robotic system. And so that integration of taking inspiration from the biological world, manifesting it in the mechanical world, and trying to understand the core design principles that would allow us to do that was really fun. You know, I can remember after my defense, I had some friends to the lab, and we had a demo of the robot that I had built with, you know, my friends who were non-engineers to celebrate. And I still love to build things. Designing and building hardware and the satisfaction of making it work is still a part of the job that I find thrilling. So these days I work mostly on walking, and walking in biped robots all the way to walking in humans. And what I found is my work on walking robots has informed how we look at the human side of walking, and it's given us new analysis and modeling techniques. And so the robotics work feeds into the human biomechanics work. But I also found that our human biomechanics work in analyzing humans and helping them walk better is informing the robotics work, because we want our robots to be efficient like humans are. Humans consume very little energy in walking, and robots consume a ton of energy in walking, relatively speaking. Humans are also very robust. They don't fall over very easily when they're pushed or disturbed, and that's a challenge we'd like our robots to accomplish. We'd like them to be more robust. So those two threads of my research feed each other quite nicely. On the biped robot side, we design and build biped robots that are aiming for efficient and robust walking. And biped robots are really good when you have uneven terrain. So you can think about it as you can run through the forest much faster than you can get through the forest on an ATV because your ATV needs a continuous path and you can jump over logs and things like that. So if the terrain is uneven, legs are very good. And the same is true in sort of a human-designed environment. You have stairs, humans are bipeds, and so we design our environments around that. And so if you want to have robots operating in an environment that was designed for humans, having the same functionality in terms of being able to walk upstairs and navigate in closed spaces is quite advantageous. So those are the goals we're pursuing in the biped robot work. On the human biomechanics work, we're looking specifically at how to help individuals who've had spinal cord injury recover their ability to walk. And so that project is in collaboration with physical therapists at Ohio State University. And we're looking at a specific type of rehabilitation using a downhill slanted treadmill to try to help excite the feedback to the brainstem through the spinal cord in a way that will help these individuals recover their full walking ability. And so that's exciting. We're using, again, those robotics analysis techniques to try to better inform therapy and design these therapy interventions that will help people recover more of their walking ability. And then sort of where these two projects meet in the middle, I have another project using exoskeletons for spinal cord rehabilitation. So this is a robot that you actually wear as an individual, and it provides power to the legs. So individuals that couldn't stand or walk without that assistance, now instead of having therapists help train them, have the ability to walk in this robot on their own. And that project is looking at how do we make the control interface for that robot more fluent. So how do we help the robot sense what the human wearer wants to do? Speed up, slow down, change direction, go up a slope, go down a slope. Right now, all of those changes are accomplished with a push button, which is kind of awkward. If I were sitting in this chair and I wanted to stand up, I'd have to press a button that would change from seated mode to stand-up mode. And then I would have another button that would switch to walking mode. And if we could make that interface more fluent, then the robot exoskeleton could sense the desire of the human user and adapt to his or her intentions without those push-button controls. And so that's sort of the gamut of projects that I have going now. Different aspects in each one, but as I said, the work in any one of them I find is sort of cross-pollinating the other projects. So I was born and raised in a Catholic family. I went to Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, and then Catholic undergraduate university. So it's a little strange. The first time I went to a public school was for my graduate work. But faith was always a really integral part of my family life growing up. We were active in our parish community, and then I remained active through high school, and then being here at Notre Dame was a great place for me to sort of grow in my independent faith life, to be surrounded by other people who took their faith seriously, some of whom had completely different faith than I did. But something I really appreciated being here as a student was I lived in the dorms, and several of my roommates were of other religious faiths. And I felt like we had more in common, despite the fact that we were of different religious faiths, we had more in common because we all took our faith seriously. And so I had a greater commonality with them than I did necessarily with people of my own faith who didn't take it seriously or weren't particularly interested in it. And then, in graduate school, it was a transition, I would say, to being even more of an independent adult faith life, where I, for a while, was part of the university church community, and then made a choice to join a parish that felt more like, I think, the parish that I had grown up in as a kid, that I felt like was a more adult environment. And now I look back and think the people at the parish were very welcoming, but I'm sure I seemed kind of strange to them at first, because another friend of mine from graduate school, he was from India, happened to be Catholic, and so he and I started going to this church together. And people would laugh at us after we'd been there about a year, like, "Oh yeah, we assumed you were the seminarians or something. We didn't know who you were." And so, that was a great experience for me, that I had been raised in a faith-filled family, and I had found faith-filled people in undergrad, and I had found, really, in graduate school, multiple faith communities, both the university, the Newman Center, and then this parish, who were very just open to having me participate in their Catholic faith community. And that was really gratifying. It helped, I think, solidify things I had been taught as a child. And now I'm part of yet a different Catholic church here in town, not the one that I grew up in. And my children are going through the same experiences. My children are on a very similar trajectory, I think, to me. They're in Catholic school and surrounded by kids who take their faith seriously, and who come from families who take their faith seriously. So when I think about the integration of my faith and my engineering career, I don't tend to think about sort of individual research projects that I do that manifest that faith. I think about it more in terms of, I guess, the parable of the talents, that I was taught at a young age that you receive these talents from God, and you have a responsibility to develop them. And so in my engineering career, getting back to one of the things I said earlier, I really try to find things that are at the intersection of my abilities and my passions. And so I mentioned that I work on spinal cord rehabilitation, which I think a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's great, you're making a difference in the world." And that sugarcoats, the way that project came to be in my mind to some extent. Yes, spinal cord rehabilitation is an important problem, and I think it does improve quality of life for people. But the reason I work on that problem is I had an opportunity where I think I have a skill set that can address the problem, and I think I have an approach through my collaborators who have complementary skills to make a difference and have an impact. And that's where I see the sort of the faith component come in, that I'm not saying, "Oh, this is important, this is what Jesus would have me do," if you will, but it's more subtle than that. It's, I have this set of gifts, I need to use them effectively, which means I need to work on important problems. And what are the important problems for which my gifts can make the biggest impact? And when that happens to be spinal cord rehab, that's the problem I'm going to work on. And so that's one aspect. The other aspect for my faith, as a Catholic, I was raised very much in the sense of salvation is through the community, right? It's through the church. It's not on a one-on-one basis. It's a collective entity. And that, I think, has informed how I work. Most of the projects that I do are very collaborative, that I seek out people who have complementary expertise, people with whom I can do more than I can do on my own. And I think some of those sensibilities from my faith life as a child influence the problems that I try to work on as an engineer, the approaches I try to take. It's more gratifying to me to work on a team, and I think I have more success, as I said, when I'm surrounded by people who complement the skills that I have, who have skills that I don't recognize in myself, and so then together we have that larger impact. And working in that collective is also, I think, an offshoot of that sense of of collective salvation through the faith community of the Catholic Church. So I think there's two ways in which my engineering work has informed my faith. One is just through the people that I've met. Particularly, I used to work with individuals who had had a stroke on balance rehabilitation, and then now working with people who have had a spinal cord injury. The inspiration of these people who have overcome such tremendous hardships and who are so bound and determined through the human spirit to regain as much of their previous ability as they can is really inspiring. And that connects very well with my faith in terms of all things being possible with the help of God. And to some extent, a responsibility to develop and use your talents as best you can. These people work much harder than I can ever imagine to develop their talents again, basic talents that would allow them to live their lives fully. And so that, I find that very inspirational and connect that experience with my faith. It's also allowed me to meet people from all over the world. Some, as I said before, some who share exactly my faith and some who share a very different faith, but share that commonality of a faith in God is completely consistent with a rigorous engineering research career. And that has enriched my experience as an individual. And then the second way my engineering work has informed my faith is to develop an even greater awe and appreciation for the wonders of creation. There's a well-known roboticist who told a group of us that we weren't real roboticists until we had children, because we didn't fully appreciate how much better a 9-month-old child was at almost everything we tried to make our robots do than anything we would ever build in our careers. And that was absolutely true. I became a real roboticist when my daughter, I guess, was born and then turned 9 months, and it was completely apparent that, yes, with reaching and coordination, she was far superior to anything I would build robotics-wise in my career. And so that level of appreciation for the wonders of God's creation is certainly stronger in me as a result of my work to design and build robots that mimic some small aspect of human capability. So for me, in the day-to-day of my engineering career, the challenge of my faith, I think, is to be patient and to be consistently excellent at what I do. I fail in both of those regards. I love to teach students. It's very energizing to work with bright young minds who are highly motivated and who I think will go on to do great things in the world, many better than what I have done. And I have a responsibility to those people as part of the academic community. And so giving them a learning experience that is as strong as I can when I have many other demands on my time requires patience and a standard of excellence. And so it is a constant challenge to deliver on those responsibilities and to stifle frustrations that can get in the way. And that's an obligation professional, and it's an obligation to meet my responsibilities from God through my faith. It's not always a matter of having a faith discussion with a student or bringing a faith perspective to my research, but on occasion those do take place. and I try to remember when I had similar conversations with people as a student myself, and some of those were very formative for me. Probably from people that don't even know they were formative, and maybe I have conversations with students that one day they would think of as formative. But I see it primarily as playing out in my responsibility to the students I work with, and then to my research and academic community in terms of serving the collective good there. So my advice would be to find that intersection of things you're passionate about, which may be your faith, and things you're really good at. Because the world doesn't reward passion. The world rewards execution. And you'll have the greatest impact if you work at that intersection of those passions and your skills. Because I find my passion for something elevates as I get better at it. And my skill at doing something elevates as I'm more passionate about it. And so it's a positive feedback loop. You can't just set out to cure cancer. I think if you want to cure cancer, you find where your skill set, which could be in sales or chemical research or what have you, can help on the problem of curing cancer. And so that would be my best piece of advice, would be find that sweet spot where your passions and your own particular skill set intersect, and focus your attention there to maximize your impact. It takes longer to identify what you're really good at. I think it's easier to identify what you're passionate and excited about, and it's a longer journey to figure out what it is that you're really talented at. And in many cases, you may not be the right person to ask that. You may want to ask your friends, your colleagues, your fellow students. What do you think of my real talents being? And that's an awkward question to ask, but I found a lot of times other people can recognize it in you better than you're able to recognize it in yourself. And so a general awareness over time of what are the things that I'm enjoying and I also feel like I did well with. And what are other people saying, yeah, that was really special, that was really something different that you contributed. And I would say also, if you see those unique skills in someone else, tell him, tell her. That's really helpful, right? Hey, you should think about doing this long term. It seems like you're really good at it. So if someone is helping you study for an exam and you always go to this person because he or she is really excellent at explaining something, tell him or her that, because that may be the difference between him or her choosing a teaching career or a career that has a lot of interaction with people versus one that doesn't, because he or she may not have that self-awareness that that's a special talent because he or she's lived with it their whole life. So my advice would be, to do what I did, which is to make decisions that leave doors open for you. If you're given two options, and they're both good options, choosing the option that leaves other doors open down the road is a good approach. Now, there are certainly examples of really successful entrepreneurs, for example, right, who, if you don't jump in with both feet and put all your money on this bet, it doesn't have the chance to grow as big as it can. And my hat is off to people who live that way, and I think they have a big impact. That's not been my personality. Choosing options that leave doors open has really paid off for me in terms of navigating my career, in terms of working on projects that that I got really excited about. And in doing that, not worrying about mistakes, right? It doesn't have to be, if you make decisions that generally leave doors open, it doesn't have to be the perfect decision. To be honest, the best advice I ever got professionally was from a colleague when I got my first job. And we went to lunch and he said, listen, you can do anything for a year, but you can't live one way for 5 years and then flip a switch and go back to the person that you were at the start. He's a mechanical engineer, so he said, 5 years of anything exerts plastic deformation on your personality. It changes who you are. You can get back, right? You can press out the plastic deformation and get back to the person you were, but you can't flip a switch and do it. And so his advice to me was, be the person you want to be and be aware of what you're doing, because if you're not, 5 years from now, you'll look in the mirror and you'll be a different person than you wanted to be. That was the best professional advice that I ever got.